I once went on a date with a girl who put ketchup on her fruit salad. This girl was beautiful. I remember she had this long flowing hair. She had such a warm smile. And personality-wise, we just clicked. We both were allergic to cats, we both hated mustard, and we were both into writing. This girl was amazing. But when I saw her pouring glob after glob of ketchup onto her fruit salad, I just had this gut reaction. The words just fell out of my mouth. Ew! Why would you do that? She stopped pouring the ketchup and got really, really quiet. The date was very awkward after that. On the drive home, all I could think about was what was wrong with me. I am such an idiot. I totally ruined the date over something super tiny. Even though this girl was beautiful, even though we had chemistry, I had to go and screw everything up. Was it gross? Of course it was. Who puts ketchup on their fruit salad? But did I have to go and blurt that out? God, I'm such an idiot. When I get home, I can't stop thinking about what a moron I am. The thoughts literally won't stop. I think about it in the shower, I think about it in the kitchen, I think about it while I'm trying to watch TV. And as time went on, I just felt worse and worse. So when I'm lying there in bed, feeling terrible, what could I do to feel more positive about what just happened? Last week we talked about why we're more likely to focus on those negative thoughts. But today I want to get into how we can redirect our focus and look at the positive things we just aren't paying attention to. I'm Damian Barton, and today we're talking about reframing. Your brain is a complex system of neurons and neural connections. We're not talking about 1 million or 1 billion. We're talking about 100 trillion neural connections in your brain. That means we have more neural connections in our brain than there are stars in our galaxy. And these connections, these pathways, they don't stay static. They move. They adjust. In Laurie Cameron's The Mindful Day, she talks about how whatever you repeatedly say and do changes the structure and function of your brain. Repetition lets our brains know what's worth adapting to. She goes on to say that when we focus on something, specific neurons fire together. And the more often they do, the stronger the neural connections become. Or, as one of her teachers put it, neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more often we think positive thoughts, the more we strengthen and reinforce those neural connections that are responsible for thinking positive thoughts. We're literally changing the structure of neurons through thought. As Cameron puts it, you can use your mind to change your brain to change your mind. So how do we do this? How do you purposely, intentionally create the neural pathways that encourage you to think more positive thoughts? One simple word: reframing. Reframing is when you adjust your perspective to focus on the positive of a situation instead of the negative. You're using thought to consciously focus on the good of the situation. Let's say you're sitting in traffic. You could be angry about how you're stuck in traffic. You could focus on the car horns or how hot it is in your car. Or you could think about how lucky it is that you have a car. I mean, if you're watching this show, you're most likely from North America. And that means that you were born in the world's 1%. It's incredibly lucky that you were born here. You could have been born anywhere, but you weren't. You grew up here. You've had a relatively good life, and even though it sucks to sit in traffic right now, at least you have the opportunity to have a car and be driving on such good roads. You see, you take a negative situation and you focus on the positive. The situation didn't change. Your interpretation of the situation changed. Reframing doesn't mean that you reframe everything to be positive. You're not going to be in a state of bliss all the time. You're never going to be totally free from negative emotions. And you don't want to be. Negative emotions act as a signal. Sadness can tell us something's wrong in our relationship. Anger can motivate us to change our situation. If we didn't have negative emotions, it would be like not having physical pain. When you fall down and you break your leg, you experience pain so that you won't put any weight on it and further damage it. You need negative emotions to signal situations that are not okay. When I first learned about reframing, I went wild. I reframed every negative thought I had for an entire month. It was amazing at first. I was so surprised that there was this genuine upsurge of positive thoughts and happy feelings. I mean, nothing in my life changed. I was taking the same classes, I was with the same girl, but I was so much happier. Then I reached a point where my life did change. I was falling behind in my classes. My girlfriend was pointing out problems in the relationship. But every time I got that signal that I needed to change, I contorted it so that it wasn't a problem. I wouldn't let myself feel any negative feelings. When you reframe everything, you don't allow any room for when reality really does require you to change. All I'm trying to say is that there's a point of too much positivity. This is what people are referring to when they talk about toxic positivity. That being said, most of us aren't anywhere near that point. Remember, our natural tendency is to think negatively. We have a negativity bias. If you want to learn more about this, watch last week's episode on negative thinking. So if we don't reframe at all, we'll naturally focus on the negative. We will focus on that girl putting ketchup on her fruit, instead of her being beautiful and fun to talk to. The more you do this, the more pleasant life becomes, because you're training your brain to notice the positive, and in turn, create more positive thoughts. So we've been talking about what reframing is, but how do we actually do it? How do we reframe? It's time for the takeaway tip. I actually reached out to the professor for this episode who taught me how to reframe, Dr. Stacy Young. These are her go-to questions to reframe a situation. What good can or did come from this? When I was driving home, thinking about what an idiot I was, I could have stopped myself and said, what good came from this? What if that one line saved me a really costly divorce down the line? What if we ended up together and got married, but grew apart and she ended up cheating on me? Saying ew might have just saved me half of everything I own. Or I could have asked, what lessons can I apply from this to my future? I could say, this is an indication that I will never find anyone and that I will die alone. Or I could look at how I'm going to be much more cautious with blurting stuff out in the future. That will serve me well and help me avoid situations like that from happening again. Or I could have asked, what skills or strengths did I develop from this? I could say, well, even though this date wasn't a success, it was great practice for future dates. Just going on a date in general works out those dating skills, so I'll be even more ready for when the right girl does come along. So remember, your brain has neuroplasticity, meaning your brain is changing and adapting to what's important. It does this through repetition, so the more positive thoughts you think, the stronger those neural pathways will be, which will encourage more positive thoughts to naturally pop up. We can practice this active positive thinking through reframing. If you want to reframe, ask one of these three questions. What good can or did come from this? What lessons can I apply from this to my future? And what skills or strengths did I develop from this? Join us next week when we talk about your emotional bladder and what happens when you don't process emotion. If you liked this video and want to be notified anytime a new video is released, hit that subscribe button. Also, I'm pleased to tell you that the Barton Blueprint now has an official Facebook and Pinterest page. There's a bunch of extra content like infographics of some of the takeaway tips, as well as some fantastic mental health quotes by many of the most notable names in the field. The links are down in the description. If you like this episode and you want to learn more about reframing, look in the description below for Laurie Cameron's fantastic book, The Mindful Day, as well as Ilana Bonnewell's Positive Psychology in a Nutshell. And a special thank you to Dr. Young for the help researching this episode. You can also find links to all of her stuff in the description below. Thank you for taking care of each other and taking care of yourself. I'll see you next week.